Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and thank you kindly for stopping by. I hope you had a great weekend. I'd firstly like to thank Bonnie Tunia for taking my thoughts on a wide variety of issues. On CNBC this morning, there's been a rally I haven't been able to follow up regarding, there's been a bit of a debate here. It's under the hashtag My Dress, My Choice. Apparently at a couple of bus stations, ladies have been stripped for being dressed inappropriately, which is ironic when you consider that you're undressing them. Tremendous debate has happened over the social media, and apparently lots of men and women were going to march, all in dresses or miniskirts. So we talked about that, talked about it. Chumi and Citibank put out a report where they basically called the Kenyan banking sector expensive. Home thoughts. We spent Sunday in Karen celebrating Ludo's birthday. I think I told you before that there is a piece in the Great Gatsby that best captures Ludo. And that piece I'll read you again because I love it. He smiled understandingly, much more than understandingly. It was one of those rare smiles with the quality of eternal reassurance in it that you may come across 4 or 5 times in life. It faced or seemed to face the whole eternal world for an instant, and then concentrated on you with an irresistible prejudice in your favor. It understood you just as far as you wanted to be understood, believed in you as you would like to believe in yourself, and assured you that it had precisely the impression of you that at your best you hoped to convey. That's Ludo for you. And then, just because I love the Great Gatsby, and as I sat there brooding on the old unknown world, I thought of Gatsby's wonder when he first picked out the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. He had come a long way to this blue lawn, and his dream must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. He did not know that it was already behind him, somewhere back in that vast obscurity beyond the city, where the dark fields of the Republic rolled on under the night. Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgiastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch out our arms further. And one fine morning, so we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. Put up an image of the Great Gatsby. And then one day I was taking a photograph of Mount Kenya at Fairmont, Mount Kenya Safari Club, and for some reason there was a mysterious green light in the photograph, which also made me connect. Mount Kenya Safari Club, which is terribly, how would you describe it? Very chic and very, well connected with Hollywood and glamour and glitz and fairy dust. And Gatsby at times was as well. The past is a dangerous business, warned Akili Mali. It is best to keep it buried. That's MG Basenji. Political reflections, and I was going to write about this on my weekly piece, but decided not to. But then I thought, well, I'll just use what I was writing. And I said, last week the image repertoire from APEC and the G20 made fascinating viewing. Did you see the photograph of the meeting between Xi Jinping and Shinzo Abe? It was as if Xi Jinping was holding his nose. Do our leaders sit in front of a mirror and practice? There are photographs of Vladimir Putin looking over his shoulder at Barack Obama. The look is one of consternation, like a child who has been let down by his friend and cannot quite internalize it. Russian aggression against Ukraine, a threat to the world, President Obama said. We're leading in dealing with Ebola in West Africa and in opposing Russia's aggression against Ukraine, which is a threat to the world. As we saw in the appalling shoot-down of MH17, he said. I'll put up an image that Tony Abbott posted of the G20, and you can see Putin right to the side. That took me back to that Barthes quote, "One of the marks of our world is perhaps this reversal. We live according to a generalized image repertoire." And as I said during the family photograph of all leaders, Putin was placed on the far left of the front row. Dmitry Peskov, Putin's statement, said by phone he couldn't rule out an early departure for the president if the working part of the G20 agenda was over, because he has meetings on Monday in Moscow and the flight is very long. Putin, do you want that the Ukrainian government eliminates everybody there, all the political enemies and adversaries? Putin said during an interview with German broadcaster ARD. Do you want it? We don't want it, and we won't allow it. He spoke with Angela Merkel for almost 4 hours during a late-night meeting where the European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker was also in attendance, gave a detailed explanation of his country's position on Ukraine, Peskov told reporters. There are many turbulent moments in the world today, Putin said. British Prime Minister earlier told Sky News that Russian warships that sailed towards northern Australia ahead of the G20 meeting were symbols of international machismo. Harper, I guess I'll shake your hand, but I've only one thing to say to you. You need to get out of Ukraine, Harper told Putin. Putin's response to the comment wasn't positive, MacDonald said without elaborating. Putin told him that this is impossible because they are not there. Asked about the tone of the meeting between the two leaders, Peskov said it was within the bounds of decency. And then Russian TV issued some satellite imagery, which they're saying proves conclusively that MH17 was shot down by a Ukrainian jet plane. President Putin, this is in Reuters, sees his country in an information war with the West. The underlying assumption is that Western media organizations are linked in a vast conspiracy to defame and undermine Russia. So the Kremlin has no choice but to reply in kind. Since the beginning of the month, Russia's state media holding Rossiya Segodnya has launched an international news agency called Sputnik, as well as RT Deutsch, a German-language version of broadcaster Russia Today. And I take you back to that comment. One of the defining bifurcations of the future will be the conflict between information masters and information victims. This information warfare will not be couched in the rationale of geopolitics, the author suggests, but will be spawned, like any Hollywood drama, out of the raw emotions, hatred, jealousy, greed, emotions rather than strategy, will set the terms of information warfare struggles. Put up a photograph of Vladimir Putin looking back at Barack Obama as they arrive with Chinese President Xi Jinping, and you'll see what I mean about that little boy sort of in disbelief of what's happened to him. And then another photograph of President Obama, Tony Abbott and Shinzo Abe during a trilateral meeting, and this was all about security. I like this comment, which is by a Chinese commentator regarding APEC and so forth. From our perspective, we see all of this agitation as noise at the surface. Then he cited that scene from Macbeth. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. The Chinese always attuned to the long view. Who are the idiots in this man's rendering? Islamic State militants said in a video on Sunday that they had beheaded the US hostage Peter Kassig and warned the United States they would kill other US citizens on your streets. Video did not show Kassig's beheading, but showed a masked man standing with a decapitated head covered in blood lying at his feet, speaking in English in a British accent. This Jihadi John fellow. The man says, "This is Peter Edward Kassig, a US citizen." The man in the video spoke with the same southern British accent as the killer of the previous hostages, dubbed Jihadi John. He was believed to have been wounded in an air attack on a meeting of IS leaders in an Iraqi town close to the Syrian border earlier this month, some media reports said. To Obama, the dog of Rome, today we're slaughtering the soldiers of Bashar, and tomorrow we will be slaughtering your soldiers. And with Allah's permission, the Islamic State will soon begin to slaughter your people in your streets. Your forces will return greater in number than they were before. This is the same Jihadi John. He quotes Sheikh Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. That we also remind you of the haunting words of our Sheikh Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. The spark has been lit here in Iraq, and its heat will continue to intensify by Allah's permission until it burns the Crusader army. The fellow in question appears to be a fellow called Abdel Majid Abdel Bari, otherwise known as El Jinni, lyricist Jinn when he was a rapper, and now Jihadi John. And he's playing on the word jinn. And jinn in the Quran, they are supernatural creatures in Islamic mythology, made of a smokeless fire, also physical in nature, being able to interfere, invisible to humans. Jinn have the power to travel large distances at extreme speeds and are thought to live in remote areas. And I think he's playing on that word. The Independent's asking, about this video, saying it's different to the others. Peter Kasich death in a different ending. What could it mean? With or without the slow motion moments and the added sound effects of steel on steel, as each fighter selects his blade from an awaiting box full of them, and of pounding hearts and fast breathing in the seconds before the acts of murder, the scene is unfathomable in its inhumanity. NATO Secretary General says Russia's warplanes are risking passenger jets. David Cameron has issued a stark message that red warning lights are flashing on the dashboard of the global economy. Eurozone is teetering on the brink of a possible third recession, high unemployment, falling growth, real risk of falling prices to emerging market economies, which were the driver of growth in the early stages of the recovery, are now slowing down. Global trade talks have stalled. Ebola, Ukraine, adding to a dangerous backdrop of instability and uncertainty. And that takes me back to something I wrote on the 25th of August, when I said my view is the new normal is a very arrhythmic world. And when I plugged arrhythmia into my computer, it threw up for years. He'd been studying the phenomenon of chaos, of which an arrhythmic heartbeat was a perfect example. His Excellency Johann Borgstam, who I saw yesterday as well, told me the signal announcing this new arrhythmic normal was the disappearance of MH370. And then on the 6th of October, I said, the world is so fluid and uncertain. Currency markets, the euro maintained a big bounce from Friday. It's 125.40, dollar index 87.54, Japanese yen 115.87, but got as high as 117.04 dollar yen, which was the strongest level for the dollar since October 2007, before the yen came back. And I'll come to the data that came out of Japan. Swiss franc 0.9570, pound above 157, 157.18, Aussie at 0.8787. This is the 31st of October high, in point of fact. And this is a pop higher on the free trade deal with China. India rupee 61.691, South Korean won 10.9521, bounced off 11.0420, which was the weakest since September 2013. Rial is at a I think 9-year low, 260. Currency fell 0.5%, weakest level since April 2005. Egyptian pound 713.50, South African rand 11.0739. The yen has tumbled almost 6% against the dollar since October 30th, when the BOJ surprised investors with further quantitative easing. Dollar index a little bit softer, but will give us a chance to get back in again, 87.54. I'll put up a 1-year chart of dollar yen. You can see what a dramatic fall it's been. They reported GDP fell at an annualized 1.6% pace in the months July to September. That's following on a fall of 7.3% in the second quarter. But basically it was expected to rebound. So these were poor numbers. But I think what it does, it delays the sales tax increase, and it gets the Japanese keener on more quantitative easing. Euro dollar, I'll put up a 1-year chart, and got a good bounce Friday, but I'm not so sure it can hold on. I still look for parity next year. 1 month implied volatility on the ruble reached 33% on November the 10th, almost double that of Brazil's real, the second most volatile among 41 major currencies tracked by Bloomberg. Ruble's volatility gauge is close to 3 times higher than South Africa's rand, which historically has had the biggest fluctuations among the world's major currencies. Interesting. Ruble has slumped 31% against the dollar this year as oil fell to a 4-year low. That's interesting. Gold bounced sharply. I'll put up a 5-day chart. You can see how it bounced. It sort of went up in a straight line, a lot of short covering. Crude oil was higher as well. My target remains $60 a barrel. US daily crude output climbed to 9.06 million barrels in the week ended November 7th, the most since 1983. And it's possible that even with an OPEC production cut, there won't be an immediate increase in prices. It sometimes takes time for the super tanker that is the oil market to switch direction. I wrote about this on the 13th of October, and I said the big game changer has been US crude output, which rose from 5.7 million barrels per day in 2011 to 8.88 million barrels a day in October, and now, according to this report, 9.06 million barrels. And I said the US administration has turned price slasher, and like in Alfred Hitchcock's totemic movie Psycho, oil has been sliced up real good. The US has flooded the oil market, and the commodity is now a geopolitical spear. It is the US that is the new price setter, I said, for the oil markets, and this is a deep and important geopolitical development. The new price levels will have immediate, enormous geopolitical and financial knock-on effects. It will place intolerable pressure on oil producers, and particularly those operating from a higher base price. Brazil's real dropped to a 9-year low as Petrobras delays a report. Petróleo Brasileiro delayed its earnings report as federal police investigated allegations of corruption and money laundering. Weakest level on a closing basis since April 2005. The real is down 1.7% since November the 7th. I'll put up a 1-year chart. And then I'll also put up a photograph of the entrance hall of the Palácio de Alvorada in Brasilia. That's by Oscar Niemeyer. And there is a very eerie and deserted petrol station on the Mombasa-Nairobi road, which reminds me of Oscar Niemeyer as well. And I call it eerie, deserted, Oscar Niemeyer looking building, which might have been a petrol station, and it's now just empty. Tour operators across Africa are reporting the biggest drop in business in living memory. A specialist travel agency, SafariBookings.com, says a survey of 500 operators in September showed a fall in bookings of between 20 and 70%. Since then, the trend has accelerated, especially in Botswana, Kenya, South Africa, and Tanzania. Directly and indirectly, tourism accounts for almost 10% of sub-Saharan Africa's GDP and pays the salaries of millions of people. And I don't think it's going to recover anytime soon. Burkina Faso have named their former foreign minister Kafando transitional president. I wrote that piece on the 10th of November, Ouagadougou's signal to sub-Saharan Africa. And I said the preeminent point to note is that protests in Burkina Faso achieved escape velocity. Overthrowing incumbents is all about acceleration, momentum, and speed. South African all shares above 50,000. This is probably for the 4th or 5th session. Up 9.386%, has bounced back well after what was a precipitous drop. South African riot police were in Parliament as Zuma insults flew. Quite a lot of drama over last week. Dollar Rand, I'll put up a 6-month chart, 1107.45. I still think we'll see a 12th print next year. Egyptian pound, well behaved, just below 715. Egyptian stock market eased 0.32%, but remains 36.0955% higher this year. Nigerian all share has bounced 6.487% since the 7th of November, but it remains down 14.391% year to date. Bond yields have also been ticking higher. Currency hit a record low. Ghana Stock Exchange up 5.361% in 2014. Report I saw this morning, Abu Musab, the spokesman for Al-Shabaab's military operations, told Reuters, "We have fired several mortar rounds on the presidential palace and we will give details later. We targeted the palace because it is the government's headquarters and all top officials are there," he said. Officials said the mortars caused no damage. No single mortar landed on the palace, government spokesman Ridwan Haji told Reuters. Sahan Journal has lovely photographs of Somalia. The headline of the article is documenting the fading image of Mogadishu's brutal war. And then there's some photographs of security guards standing to attention at Jazeera Beach, pristine beach located over 20 kilometers outside Mogadishu. Then another photograph of the buildings and roads in the Indian Ocean port city. Most have got damaged by mortars and bullets. But well worth having a look, and plenty of optimism, particularly on social media, developing about Somalia. Congo says its separate Ebola outbreak is over. That's interesting. And then an interesting article in Bloomberg, beating Ebola hinged on sipping a gallon of liquid a day. When people are infected, they get dry as a crisp real quickly. The tragedy is that they don't want to drink. I still remain of the view that the severity of the Ebola outbreak is not in the absolute numbers, but it's in the speed of infections, or what Virilio calls the escape velocity. Jeffrey Gettleman has written an interesting piece about the oil dispute in the Congo around the Virunga National Park. Well worth reading. DRC, the trouble started when a British company suddenly appeared in this iconic and spectacularly beautiful national park prospecting for oil. Villagers who opposed the project were beaten by government soldiers. A park warden who tried to block the oil company Soco International from building a cell phone tower in the park was kidnapped and tortured. Virunga's director, a Belgian prince, was shot and nearly killed after hours. I heard him speak, actually. The Belgian ambassador is very impassioned about the Virunga, after he delivered a secret report on the oil company's activities. I put up a photograph of water being fetched from Lake Edward in Virunga National Park. If oil is found beneath the lake, the park map may be redrawn. Gettleman. My piece over the weekend was dwindling oil fortunes not good for Kenya. I said, in Scarface, a 1983 film directed by Brian De Palma, Tony Montana, Al Pacino, says to his boss, Frank Lopez, "You short a couple of million, I go on the street for you. I make a couple of moves, $1 million here, $1 million there, you got it." The availability of cash is evidenced by the more than 4 times oversubscription of our Eurobond and by the news last week of a $750 million facility availed by the IMF. This arrangement would serve as an insurance purpose, providing Kenya with access to IMF resources in the event of exogenous shocks, and the IMF confirms that. The IMF's positive imprimatur also improved the shilling, which bounced back below 90. The IMF said this about the shilling: a gradual depreciation of the Kenyan shilling mostly reflects developments in international currency markets. Today, the National Treasury is surely considering a sukuk bond, a samurai issued in yen bond, a diaspora bond, amongst others. It's not a golden flood of liquidity, but it's a post-independent sweet spot, and this remains an important development. Now, as we leverage Kenya Inc.'s balance sheet, the new challenge is execution. Interestingly, this shape of challenge applies to Kenya Airways. Execution is all about making sure the money is spent on what it was meant to be spent, and that there is reduced slippage. I'm a big believer in the resourcefulness of our human capital, like the Swiss professor Urs Wiesmann, who was the prime author behind Kenya's Socioeconomic Atlas released last week, and whom I interviewed over the weekend, and had some very interesting points. My concern at this moment is this: we are necessarily placing a big bet on oil and gas and cementing our position as the pivot, the energy conduit and route to the sea state for this region. Now go take a look at the price of oil. It's been slammed from above $100 a barrel to below 80. There is an outside chance that we can break down to $50 a barrel. The share prices of the oil companies, Tullow Oil is down 45.84% this year. Africa Oil, which is a pure East Africa oil play, is negative 60.67%. these prices have cratered. The markets are signaling loud and clear that the economics have changed and how. Both Tullow and Africa Oil are exploration companies. They find the oil and then they typically go and find a big major with deep pockets to exploit the oil. It is imperative that we see the majors step in. Otherwise, the can will get kicked down the road. The consequential effects on our economy of the can being kicked down the road are not good at all, I said. Our policymakers need to react real quick to the new normal. The right signal at this point in time would be to slash the proposed capital gains tax. It's always better to tax something rather than nothing. I'll put up a link for Tullow's share price, that's down 45.84% this year, and one for Africa Oil, which is down 60.67% this year. I did an interview at the back end of last week with Joshua Oigara, the CEO of KCB. That link is now posted on Rich Wrap-Ups and on the front page of the website. I'll also post a link for KCB share price data. Safaricom closed at a record and served up a 30.599 total return so far this year. Have a look at the interview I did with Bob immediately after the release of his first half earnings, which beat the street. Kenya shilling marginally below 90 at 89.95. Nairobi all-share up 19.795% this year, not far off an all-time high, and that's all about Safaricom pushing that index higher. NSE 20 up 4.32% year-to-date, and 267 points below a 6-year high reached in September. 3 international fast food chains have in the past week launched operations in Nairobi: Domino's Pizzas, Cold Stone Creamery, Ocean Basket. And that's, we've got dense cities now, good demand, and that's why these folks are coming in. Friday, big headline news was obviously all around the IMF reaching a preliminary agreement with Kenya. Very positive assessment as well. All share rallied. It's just 105% below a record, and I expect that record to be broken before year end. Once again, thank you so much for stopping by.